Hi, this is Sabrina from A Space to Create Art. Today we're talking about Gustave Klimt's Tree of Life, and then we're creating our own Tree of Life. Okay, so we're talking about Gustave Klimt, and the cool thing about Klimt, he's one of my favorite artists, and he loved using pattern. And if you look at his painting, The Tree of Life, that's what we're going to base our final project on. And the thing that I like to do, instead of the kids trying to exactly replicate, you'll find a lot of lessons that have how to draw Gustave Klimt's Tree of Life. Just kind of let them go crazy with it. Maybe have them identify a few of the things that they see, like the eyes and the bird and some of the flowers, and then let them create their own tree and put patterns into the tree. So I'm going to go ahead and start. I will put like a template of just a basic curly branch tree in the packet. So the main thing though is for them not to try to do it exactly, but just kind of go off each of the branches and create these really pretty swirls. And they don't have to do them all the same direction. They can do some facing up and some facing down until they feel like it's nice and balanced. I had some kids who actually kind of blocked in one side of their tree and filled these branches with pattern, which turned out really pretty. One thing they do want to do is fill the page. Fill the page with these beautiful curving tree branches, just like that. And then they can come back and they can decide, do I want to use, some of these same patterns that Klimt used. There's little triangles in here, circles, like I said, this eye shape, or do I want to come up with my own? And either way works. I'm going to put a big eyeball right here in the center, so it looks like the tree is looking at you. It's the Tree of Life, so I'm going to go ahead and put that eyeball in there. Once they get the line drawing done, you're going to have them outline it in Sharpie and then add color. And we use the tree that you saw earlier, and then they kind of thicken some of the branches and start adding some of those patterns into those spaces. You're going to trace this using a light box, and you're gonna outline it with a permanent marker or a Sharpie, and then we're going to paint it with watercolor. So anyway, I'm just gonna go ahead and start tracing, and I will speed up the video here. It's always good to have kids create a draft before they go to final art. It just makes their artwork better. And if there's one thing that I would recommend to any art teacher who wants their student work to come out higher quality, the thing I would suggest is to always have them do a draft before starting their final. And artists always do that. There's very rarely an artist, unless they've been painting for a very, very long time, who just sits down at a canvas and starts painting. They usually have done studies and thumbnails and all kinds of different things before their final painting is done. It's part of the artistic process. So I encourage kids to pick out patterns from Klimt's work and use some of those patterns in this artwork because we're learning about Klimt, but that doesn't mean that they can't create some of their own patterns, and actually that's what makes it personal and that's what makes it art. So always kind of allow for freedom in how they interpret his work. And you're going to find that the kids are amazing. They'll do things that you never would have thought of. Probably Klimt wouldn't even have thought of. Okay, so I have my basic outline. Now we get to do the fun part, which, in my opinion, which is the watercolor. And whenever you're using cake watercolor like this, you always want to have the students get it wet before you even start painting. So I had already put some water on this before I started, and I'm just going to come in and I'm going to start doing some painting. And whenever you're mixing colors, you take it from here and you put it over into these little bins. You always start with the lightest color first. So I'm going to create kind of a yellow-green for my grass. And you want to make a pretty good size puddle. Depends on how much, but I'm going to do this whole part, a lot of that green, so get quite a bit going. I don't want to have to remix it too much. Gonna let this dry before I come back with any kind of violet or anything, because I don't want it to blend. So you want to let it dry and then come back over that. I'm gonna make this flowers violet. When you're doing this watercolor, what you want to think about when you're doing these little different decorative elements, you want to think about what colors you're going to be sitting next to each other, because if you try to combine two colors that are across from each other on the color wheel, it's going to get really brown and kind of like neutral tones on you. So you just want to make sure, that's okay if that's what you want to do, but you just want to make sure that you're using colors so that it's the way you want it to look. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to keep, most of my colors are going to be sitting close to each other on the color wheel. So analogous colors like red, violet, blue, violet, those all kind of sit together on the color wheel. So they mix well together. I'm going to do some wet and wet blending. So I'm going to drop wet paint onto wet paint. And what it does is it kind of just blends on the paper. And it looks pretty cool. So you can do some of that in your artwork. The more water you add to watercolor, the lighter it is. You can layer watercolor. So you don't add white to make lighter blue with watercolor, you just add water to make lighter blue. I'm just going to go over these with yellow because I know that when I want to go over the top of them, and it'll just turn to the color that I want it to turn to when I add that second color. So I'll show you in a minute what I'm talking about. I'll let it dry a minute. So if I come back over the top of these now with green, because yellow and green go so well together, kind of saves you a little time, because you can just go over it with yellow, then come back over the top with green, and you'll never know. And it actually looks even better because it creates unity in the two colors. They match better. The thing I love about Klimt, and it's similar with clay, with Paul Klee, is that it's seriously just like having fun, just like taking a line for a walk is what I say about clay. With Klimt, very similar. It's just so much fun, just all these patterns. It can't help but look good when it's done, just because it has all of this visual interest. And these make such cute Christmas cards. Oh my gosh. The thing is, you guys, don't stress about this. Like, this is not the project to stress about. It's not. So just have fun. I think the key to this one really though is going to be keeping your colors nice and bright and really paying attention to color theory. Knowing what colors are going to blend well together is going to be a big part of how your artwork comes out. So just if you do what I kind of said, which is to keep the colors close to each other on the color wheel, you should be fine. So when you paint the background, you're going to want a bigger brush. So the bigger surface you're trying to cover, the bigger the brush you want. And also you want to let everything dry before you start doing the background, because your paint is going to want to stay where it's wet. So for example, I'm just going to start by doing the bottom right hand side, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to add water, and I'm not going to touch actually the edges. I'm going to try my best to stay away from the edges. I'm not going to promise that I will, but I will try. And you can go right over these thin lines, and then I'm gonna do blue because I'm a traditionalist, but you can do whatever color you want. It does not have to be a blue sky. And you want to try to keep a wet edge with your watercolor, because if you let your watercolor dry, it's gonna create a hard edge. I'm going to drop a little bit of green in there. Actually, I did that on accident, but I like the way it looks, so I'm just like this is called scumbling, when you move your brush back and forth and kind of try to keep it from looking too organized. So you're like turning your brush up and down. So if you do get a hard edge, like right there where I did, so you just kind of scrub it a little bit. It's like scrubbing the brush, pushing the paint, and you can kind of get rid of it. And while this is still wet, I want to drop a little bit of the violet in here. If I can, do it real quick. So you can layer watercolor paint once it's dry. If you go over it with another layer, it's going to get darker. And so what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to marry these two sides just a little bit more so that it doesn't look quite so light on one side and dark on the other. That looks pretty cool. So down here is nice and dry where the little flowers are. So I'm just coming right back over. You know, to be honest, you guys, I could paint on this like forever. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and stop. And you guys have fun with this one because that's what it's gonna be, is lots of fun to do. So make lots of different patterns, keep your colors bright. This is Sabrina from A Space to Create Art. Have fun creating.